When Michelle Pfeiffer stepped into the spotlight again at 67, no one was ready for what they saw. The Hollywood icon, who once captivated millions with her beauty and grace, has done it again. But this time it's different. Her timeless glow, her quiet strength, and the way she defied age itself left fans in awe. People can't stop talking, photos are going viral, and everyone is asking the same question: how does she still look this incredible? Michelle Pfeiffer's story begins in the quiet suburbs of Santa Ana, California, far from the glitter of movie sets and red carpets. She was born on April 29, 1958, into a working-class family that knew more about endurance than luxury. Her father, Richard, spent long days under the California sun, fixing air conditioners, coming home with oil on his hands and tired eyes. Her mother, Donna Jean, was the kind of woman who held the whole family together with patience and quiet strength. She woke before sunrise, made breakfast, packed lunches, and somehow managed to stretch every dollar just far enough. Their home was small, but it carried the warmth of love and discipline. Michelle grew up with 3 siblings, and though there wasn't much money, there was pride. Pride in hard work, in doing things right, in keeping dignity even when life wasn't easy. The days followed a steady rhythm. The hum of the refrigerator, the clink of her father's tools, her mother's gentle voice calling everyone to dinner. It wasn't a sad home, but for a restless, curious girl like Michelle, it sometimes felt too quiet, too small. She often looked out her window at night, wondering what existed beyond the edges of her world. By 16, Michelle was working at a local supermarket, her name tag pinned neatly over her uniform. She smiled at customers and bagged groceries, but inside, she dreamed of something she couldn't yet describe. The sound of the cash register, the flicker of fluorescent lights, the smell of the aisles, all of it felt like a cage. Sometimes after her shift, she'd walk home barefoot just to feel free, just to remind herself she was still alive. Later, she admitted, "I felt invisible. I didn't know why. I just knew I didn't belong there." Her parents didn't raise her to chase fame. They raised her to survive. From her father, she learned strength, the kind that doesn't need words. From her mother, she learned grace, the kind that never fades, even when you're tired. Together, those lessons became her armor. Michelle's quietness wasn't weakness, it was her foundation. Beneath her soft voice and gentle smile burned a determination no one could see yet. That hidden fire was patient, waiting for the right moment. She didn't shout her dreams to the world, she carried them silently, like a secret. And though she didn't know it yet, the girl who once counted spare change at the grocery counter would one day become one of Hollywood's most unforgettable stars. Because some fires don't start with sparks. They begin in silence and grow until the whole world can feel their warmth. When Michelle Pfeiffer first arrived in Los Angeles, she wasn't chasing fame as much as she was chasing freedom. She left behind the quiet hum of Santa Ana and drove toward a city that promised everything, but offered nothing easily. Hollywood, with all its flashing lights and golden lies, was not waiting for her. It barely noticed her at all. She was just another young woman, with wide eyes and a dream too big for her small-town past. Her first apartment was a single room that smelled faintly of dust and rain. The walls were thin, the rent was high, and the future felt like a story she didn't yet know how to write. She worked wherever she could, waiting tables, answering phones, even modeling part-time to keep herself afloat. Every dollar mattered. Some nights she'd eat canned soup straight from the tin, the metal spoon clinking softly in the quiet room. She wasn't starving for food. She was starving for a chance. For someone to see her. For something to happen. But Hollywood was cold. Casting directors smiled politely, called her beautiful, and then moved on. Those words, meant as compliments, felt like chains. Beautiful was the box they wanted to keep her in. Pretty face, soft voice, nothing more. Still, she didn't give up. She took acting classes, studied, and learned how to make her stillness speak louder than words. But it was a long road. Her early work, small TV roles, forgettable parts, came and went without notice. In 1978, in a burst of bravery, she entered the Miss Orange County beauty pageant. Not because she wanted the title, but because she needed an escape route. Winning opened a small door. Commercials, auditions, a handful of scripts. But even then, the world still saw her as decoration, not depth. Then came Grease 2, the sequel everyone thought would make her a star. Instead, it almost ended her career. The critics were harsh, calling her performance flat, her presence forgettable. The humiliation hit hard. That night, she drove home through the neon blur of Los Angeles and stared at her reflection in the rearview mirror, whispering, "Maybe they're right." But she wasn't done. Rejection only sharpened her will. She studied harder, pushed deeper, and kept showing up, audition after audition, door after door, until one day she got the call that would change her life, an audition for Scarface. She wasn't the studio's first choice. Al Pacino himself doubted her. Too soft, they said. Too green. But when she walked into that room, trembling but ready, something inside her clicked. She became Elvira Hancock before she even opened her mouth, her voice cool, her eyes distant, her every word like a blade wrapped in silk. When she finished, the room fell silent. Pacino later said, "I was wrong." She was extraordinary. When Scarface hit theaters in 1983, the girl no one believed in became unforgettable. Her icy beauty, her quiet danger, she was electric. Hollywood finally looked up. But with recognition came the weight of expectation. Every role after that felt like a test she had to pass twice, once for herself, once for the world that had doubted her. She took each challenge head on. In The Witches of Eastwick, she danced between charm and power. In Dangerous Liaisons, she bared her soul and earned her first Oscar nomination. She was no longer the pretty face. She was an artist. But behind the scenes, the pace was brutal. Endless flights, sleepless nights, film sets that blurred together. She moved from character to character without time to breathe, always pushing, always proving. Some nights she'd fall asleep still wearing her makeup, too tired to wash away the day. Fame was everything she had dreamed of, and nothing she had imagined. It was bright, but it was cold. People adored her face but never asked about her heart. By the late 1980s, Michelle Pfeiffer had become one of the most sought-after actresses in Hollywood. Yet the more the world praised her, the more she began to disappear behind the roles. Then came The Fabulous Baker Boys. The role of Susie Diamond demanded everything: her voice, her body, her truth. She sang until her throat burned, practiced until her fingers bled. When she slid across that piano in that red dress, the crew held their breath. It wasn't just performance, it was release. The girl who once felt invisible was now seen by the entire world. That scene earned her a Golden Globe and another Oscar nomination, but it also stripped her bare. After that, there was no more pretending. Fame had finally crowned her, but it had also taken its toll. Every success came with exhaustion. Every applause echoed with emptiness. There were moments she'd look around her perfect life, the awards, the headlines, the luxury, and feel completely alone. "I was living everyone else's dream," she once said. "But I had forgotten what mine was." Still, Michelle didn't break. She adjusted. The same quiet strength that carried her from the supermarket to the screen became her compass again. She began to choose her work differently, not for fame, but for meaning. By the time she put on the catsuit in Batman Returns, she was no longer proving anything. She was claiming her place. Her Catwoman was fierce, funny, and heartbreakingly human. The world couldn't look away. For once, the superhero didn't outshine the woman. Michelle Pfeiffer had done the impossible. She had conquered Hollywood on her own terms. She had walked through its darkness, through rejection, through exhaustion, and somehow come out shining brighter. The beauty that once trapped her had become her weapon. The silence that once made her invisible had become her voice. And in that transformation, she didn't just survive Hollywood. She rewrote what it meant to belong in it. Love came to Michelle Pfeiffer quietly, without the red carpets or flashbulbs that would later define her life. It was 1979 when she met Peter Horton, a young actor and director with the same restless energy she carried inside. They were both dreamers, still building their names, still struggling to pay rent, and still believing that love could be the one thing strong enough to anchor them in a world that moved too fast. Their romance began simply: shared coffee, late-night talks, laughter over burnt dinners. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and sometimes that felt like enough to build a whole world. In 1981, they got married in a small ceremony under a California sunset. No headlines, no glitter, just promises whispered softly between two people who thought love would be enough. For a while, it was. They shared dreams, scripts, and tiny victories. When one faced rejection, the other picked them up. They were partners in both ambition and fear. But Hollywood has a way of testing even the strongest hearts. As Michelle's career began to rise, the balance started to shift. Fame didn't just change her schedule, It changed the rhythm of their lives. She was on movie sets for months, surrounded by cameras and endless expectations, while Peter was building his own career as a director. Their conversations became shorter, their laughter less frequent. Nights that used to end with whispered dreams now ended in silence. There wasn't a single moment where everything fell apart. It happened slowly, quietly, like sand slipping through fingers. Michelle later said, "Sometimes love doesn't end with anger, it just forgets how to stay." By 1988, after years of trying to find their way back, they quietly agreed to let go. Their divorce wasn't a tabloid scandal, it was heartbreak wrapped in respect. They kept their dignity and their silence. But inside, Michelle was shattered. She had built a life around the idea that love could fix everything, and suddenly she was alone. Her house felt too quiet, her success too heavy. She would leave the TV on just to fill the silence. "I thought forever was something you could keep," she said later, "but sometimes forever only lasts as long as you both keep looking in the same direction." That heartbreak carved something deep inside her, a space she didn't know how to fill. For a long time, she tried to outrun the loneliness with work. Movie after movie, performance after performance, she smiled for cameras while hiding a storm behind her eyes. But time, as it always does, softened the sharp edges of her pain. And in that softness, something unexpected began to bloom. A second chance. In 1993, a friend set her up on a blind date with a writer and television producer named David E. Kelley. She wasn't expecting much. She'd learned that fairy tales don't always last. But when they met, something shifted. There was no pretense, no performance, just comfort. At the time, Michelle was in the process of adopting a baby girl, Claudia Rose. On their second date, she told David about it, unsure of how he'd react. He smiled and said, "Then I guess I'll be meeting my daughter soon." That moment changed everything. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was quiet understanding, the kind that says, "You don't have to pretend anymore." They married later that year in a private ceremony far from the chaos of Hollywood. It wasn't about spectacle. It was about peace. A year later, they welcomed a son, John Henry. For the first time in her adult life, Michelle felt grounded. Her home wasn't a stage, it was a sanctuary. The woman who once lived by scripts now lived by love, by bedtime stories, school lunches, and family dinners. "I didn't quit acting," she once said. "I just chose my life." Fame didn't disappear, but it no longer defined her. She turned down big roles, choosing instead to be present for her family. While David wrote and produced shows like Ally McBeal and The Practice, Michelle built a quiet life around laughter, patience, and devotion. Of course, even the best marriages aren't perfect. There were nights when they were both exhausted. Him lost in scripts, her in motherhood. Sometimes silence returned, but this time it wasn't empty. It was peaceful. They learned that love isn't about never arguing. It's about always coming back. "We give each other space," Michelle said. "And we never stopped laughing." Their laughter became their secret language, the sound of endurance, the rhythm of staying. More than 30 years later, their bond remains unshaken. They've grown older, wiser, softer with time. The passion is still there, but it has matured into something steadier. The kind of love that doesn't burn out, but glows quietly in the background of everyday life. When Michelle talks about David now, her voice carries the warmth of someone who knows what it's like to lose and to be found again. "He's my home," she says simply. Not in a poetic sense, but a real one. Because for Michelle Pfeiffer, love was never about the grand gestures or the spotlight. It was about the quiet moments, the ones no camera could ever capture. A morning coffee shared in silence, a child's laughter echoing through the house, a husband's hand reaching for hers, steady and sure. After all the fame, the heartbreak, and the lessons, she discovered that the truest kind of love isn't the one that rescues you, it's the one that lets you rest. There comes a time in every life when the noise quiets down, when the lights dim, and all that's left is what truly matters. For Michelle Pfeiffer, that time came gently, not as an ending, but as a transformation. After decades of rushing from one film set to another, of living through applause and heartbreak, she began to find peace not in the sound of success, but in the calm between moments. The woman who once defined Hollywood elegance now lives with a grace that can't be photographed, the kind that comes only from knowing who you are and what you've survived. Her mornings begin quietly. No red carpets, no makeup chairs, no endless rehearsals. Just soft light spilling through the windows of her California home. The air smells like coffee and earth from her garden. Some mornings she walks barefoot through the grass, the dew cool against her skin. It's her small ritual, a way of reminding herself that she's still connected to the real world, the one beyond cameras and scripts. She doesn't chase time anymore, she moves with it. Every gesture, every word feels unhurried. The same poise that once made her magnetic on screen now gives her life a rare kind of stillness. Her home with David E. Kelley reflects that same calm. It's not a mansion built for show, but a sanctuary filled with memories. A piano rests in one corner, a quiet tribute to the fabulous Baker Boys. Nearby hang her children's framed drawings, a reminder of the years that mattered most. There are books stacked on tables, sunlight filtering through sheer curtains, and an unspoken warmth that fills every room. It's not a house meant to impress, it's one meant to hold love. In a world obsessed with more, Michelle has learned the art of enough. When she talks about her career now, there's no hint of regret, only gratitude. She knows the weight of what she's accomplished. Not just the awards or the box office numbers, but the moments that changed how people saw women in film. She gave depth to beauty, intelligence to desire, and vulnerability to strength. Her characters, from Elvira in Scarface to Catwoman in Batman Returns, were never just roles. They were reflections of real emotions, shaped by her honesty. Critics often called her a master of silence, an actress who could say everything with just her eyes. That gift didn't come from training, it came from life. From the years she spent learning how to listen, how to endure, how to breathe through pain without losing her softness. In recent years, she's chosen her roles differently, not for fame or money, but for meaning. Films like French Exit and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania remind audiences that her presence still commands attention, not through noise but through authenticity. She doesn't act to prove anything anymore. She acts to express, to explore, to stay curious. "I don't need to be everywhere," she once said. "I just need to be where it feels true." That simple truth has become the foundation of her legacy. Outside of Hollywood, Michelle's life is defined by quiet generosity. She doesn't announce her philanthropy with flashing headlines or photo ops. She gives because it feels right. Over the years, she's supported countless causes: children's education, environmental safety, animal welfare, cancer research, not for recognition, but out of empathy. She serves on the board of the Environmental Working Group, advocating for clean air, safe food, and a healthier planet. Her activism is not loud, but steady, like the rhythm of her own heartbeat. It's the same quiet strength she's carried all her life, proof that kindness doesn't need an audience to matter. Her beauty, once a subject of constant fascination, has evolved into something deeper. At 67, she wears time like an artist wears brushstrokes, with acceptance, even pride. The lines near her eyes are not flaws, they're stories, each one a reminder of laughter, love, and endurance. She doesn't chase youth, she honors it for what it gave her and lets it go. "You can't fight time," she once said with a smile, "but you can make peace with it." That peace radiates from her now, in her voice, in her calm, and the way she carries herself. It's the kind of beauty that doesn't fade, because it isn't about appearance. It's about presence. Michelle's relationship with her children remains the heart of her world. Claudia and John Henry are grown now, carving their own paths far from the glare of fame. Yet their bond with her remains unshakable. They describe her not as a star, but as a grounding force. A mother who listens, who laughs, who shows up. When she looks at them, she sees her legacy, not in the movies she made, but in the love she gave. "Motherhood didn't stop my career," she once said. "It gave it meaning." And in that single sentence lies her truth. There are days when she revisits her old films, not to relive the past, but to honor the person she once was. Watching herself as Elvira or Catwoman feels like meeting old friends, women who helped her grow. She smiles at their courage, their flaws, their fire. Those characters, like chapters in a book, each taught her something about herself. But now she doesn't live in those stories. She's writing new ones, quieter ones, lived in gardens and laughter and candlelight dinners with her husband. At this stage of her life, Michelle Pfeiffer doesn't seek immortality through fame. She's found something richer: peace through authenticity. She no longer measures her worth in awards or attention. Her value lies in her grace, her kindness, her ability to live fully without noise. When asked what legacy she hopes to leave behind, she doesn't mention stardom or fortune. She says simply, I hope people remember that I tried to live beautifully. And she has. Because Michelle Pfeiffer's story isn't about fame that burned bright and faded. It's about light that lasted. Quiet, steady, human. She taught the world that true power lies not in being seen, but in being genuine. That stillness can speak louder than any applause. And that beauty, real beauty, is not in perfection, but in peace. So now, when the world grows loud and restless, Michelle remains still. Not because she's given up, but because she's found what she was always searching for: herself. The shy girl from Santa Ana, who once felt invisible, now shines without trying. Her life, like her art, has become a lesson in balance, in grace, in the art of simply being. And perhaps that's her greatest role yet. A woman who turned silence into strength, and stillness into something eternal.